Sorry for that interruption in that last reading of Chapter 3. Boys and girls, we are on page 24, the third full paragraph. It starts off, Ma was still talking. It seemed that in Williamsburg and the other historical tourist sites, people just pretended to live there in that time period. Then they went home at the end of the day to their 20th century lives, and tourists in their shorts and tank tops, strange 20th century clothing, Ma explained, had packed the streets of the tourist sites, kind of killing all the historical feeling. So Miles Clifton wanted some place where people lived 24 hours a day, year-round, and the tourists were hidden, Ma said. Ma paused. Jessie wrapped and unwrapped one bonnet string around her finger. She was missing something in Ma's explanation. Then she understood. She jerked back, hitting her head on the King of the Mountain Rock. You mean people watch us? Like, looking down, Ma nodded. All the time? No, but a lot. Oh, Jessie, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to think how this must sound to you. It's terrible that you've been watched all these years and you never knew it, and that's the part of Clifton we all agreed to before things got worse. Jessie stopped listening. She was thinking about all the things that she had done that she wouldn't have wanted anyone else to see. Once, when she was really little, she had stolen a piece of barley candy from Mr. Stewart's counter, but she felt so horrible that she took it back when no one was looking. And then when Andrew was small, still too young to talk, she slapped him while Ma's back was turned, because Jessie hated everyone cooing over what a cute baby he was. And then there'd been other times when she'd been alone or just with Mary, and they'd done dumb things like making fake faces at trees or doing imitations of all the adults in Clifton. Mr. Smythe as a bear, Mrs. Seward as a peacock. No one else was supposed to see those things. The people called tourists were watching her then, too. And for the first time in her life, Jessie wanted to scream at Ma, but Ma looked so worried and sad that Jessie couldn't. Jessie felt her anger ebb. Well, you always did tell us that God was everywhere, that God saw everything we did, Jessie said weakly. Ma laughed. We tried to emphasize that. Would you have obeyed any better? Would you have obeyed any better if we had said God and lots of people you don't know? Jessie shrugged, thinking hard. But how? How do these tourists see us? The mirrors in all the buildings work kind of like telescopes, I guess. That's not my area of science. And in a confusing way, Ma explained that the mirrors looked ordinary to everyone in Clifton, but they also carried images to people watching in rooms below the village. Some buildings had false backs, too, that people could watch through, and throughout the village there were hidden things called video cameras and microphones. The tree, Jessie said suddenly, remembering. That must have been a camera in the one haunted tree. And she recalled the glint of glass and the spanking she had received for trying to get a closer look. Yes, you shouldn't have been spanked for that, but it was to protect you, Ma said. From what? Ma took Jessie's hand, cautioning her to wait for the rest of the story. And when Miles Clifton announced in 1980 that he was looking for about 25 families willing to live like their great-great-grandparents, there was a lot of speculation about who would be interested, Ma said. People predicted a lot of crazies, and maybe they were right, Ma said. Some people volunteered for Clifton because they thought the United States had become very sinful. They thought that they could practice their religion better in the 1800s, and some people were running away from something in their 20th century lives. Others were environmentalists. Environmentalist? Jessie tried out the long word. People who were concerned about the way men were destroying the earth. Most of them ended up leaving. Some weren't willing to live so primitively, and others found America in the early 1800s was even more wasteful than in the 1980s. What about you and Pa? Jessie asked. Pa, I think, was the only person who just plain wanted to live in the 1800s, and I was too much in love with him to tell him no, Ma finished in a husky voice. Jessie looked away, out into the dark woods. Ma and Pa didn't talk much about love. Pa had worked in a historical village in Massachusetts, learning how to be a blacksmith, Ma explained. He got real good at it, but there wasn't much call for blacksmithing in the 1980s. Jessie couldn't understand that blacksmiths did everything, but she let Ma go on. Ma had been a nurse, which was kind of like a doctor, but there weren't any nurses in the early 1800s, so she gave that up. But you still take care of sick people, Jessie said. Not the way they should be taken care of. Medicine's much better in the future." She laughed bitterly. "Did I say future? It's really gotten to me." Jessie couldn't get used to Ma sounding like that. She reached out and she touched Ma's face. It was wet. Jessie had never seen her mother cry. Ma looked up, and Jessie could see her tears glistening in the lamplight. It scared her. She wondered if Ma had gone. She wondered if Ma had gone mad. What if this were all some story Ma had made up? It seemed like a lot to make up. Ma saw Jessie looking at her and pulled her into a hug. "Oh, Jessie, I'm sorry. I don't like seeing you so terrified. Pa and I never knew what a nightmare this would turn into. Although the tourists saw things as they were in the early 1800s, the people of Clifton at first had life much easier. Miles Clifton promised that they would get modern medical care when they needed it, and in drought years food was shipped in so no one would starve. People were allowed to leave when they wanted to, and they were supposed to be able to tell their children the truth about Clifton when they turned 12. We wanted you to all have a choice to make your own decision about what century you wanted to live in." "But I'm 13, Jessie said. Again, her voice was bitter. Gradually, Miles Clifton took away everything that wasn't authentic, as he called it. The modern medicine had stopped only 6 months earlier, but years before that, people were forbidden to leave or to mention the outside world as it really was. Adults weren't supposed to talk about the 20th century with one another, let alone their children, and all the entrances to and exits from Clifton were sealed or guarded. The cameras, which were originally limited to only designated spots, appeared everywhere to watch everything the Clifton residents did or said, and people were punished for anything that didn't fit Miles Clifton's idea of the early 1800s. "That's what's wrong with okay and shut up," Ma said. "People said those words all the time in the 1980s, and it was hard to break the habit, so you children picked it up and didn't understand." "I always asked about it," Jessie said, remembering what a pest she had been, "and you got in trouble." "They beat Pa." Jessie remembered a time that Pa had come home with a black eye and bruises all over. He said he had been kicked by a horse, but there was too much blood on his back. "Oh, Ma, it wasn't your fault, but that should let you know the danger you face." All right, so boys and girls, we know that the problem is kids have, now we know Ma has the professional background to know that diphtheria is probably what these kids have. And Ma, being that she's from the present time, knows the dangerous disease that diphtheria is. So she knows the gravity of the situation, just how much trouble these kids are in if they don't get some good modern day medicine and some help and some help quickly. So we also know that Clifton Village is heavily guarded. We know that they've sealed off the entrances to and from Clifton, and so we should be, as a reader, we should be getting a sense that what Ma's asking Jessie to do is going to be very dangerous. So right now, as you stop this video, I want you to make a prediction in your head and be ready to discuss it tomorrow in class. But what do you think Ma is going to ask Jessie to do? All right. Let's see if your predictions hold true. Happy reading for the next time, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.